am super excited for our conversation today. I think this will be a very fun and light conversation, but very engaging and relevant as well. Bringing in the perspectives and reflections of another professional who's been in the game for a while and can share some great anecdotes about her years in the res life field. But we will start out though. If you want to give folks a brief introduction and your professional background, kind of just how did you get to be where you are today?
My name is Crystal Lay, and I'm currently a director of campus living. Been in that role for a couple of months now and really enjoy this particular campus because it's almost 50% first generation college students. And so the way we approach our work and the resources that we provide to students has been really, really neat. As a first student myself, my background, how I got into it, I was an RA my junior year. Prior to that, I applied to be an orientation leader, and I just am not an orientation leader. I am not that spirited rah rah person, but I did find a lot of fun and enjoyment in becoming an RA. And then I found out from one of my peers that I could go to graduate school for free. And so, being a first gen student, not thinking I would get a bachelor's, to have this opportunity presented to get a graduate degree was really appealing. And that I just took off from there and did the traditional role of RA, grad, hall director, assistant director, etc. And here I am.
Awesome. Yes, a classic story and one that I share many beats of as well. Where like I think what stuck out to me because I think maybe we're kind of similar in this way. Where like um, we're not sort of the like typical RA and that sort of thing. Because like I worked in orientation as a grad, but it was always like sort of like behind the scenes, sort of like helping all those very extroverted orientation leaders do their best work and all that. And I think as an RA, like I ended up kind of stepping up into a leadership position in my second year to again do some more of like the duty scheduling and like stuff that helped everybody's lives be a little bit easier, and kind of found my niche and my leadership style through that time where as a first gen student wasn't like super involved in high school and all these other sort of things. Like it was obviously just such a incredible opportunity to learn and grow, and similarly again have this opportunity to go to graduate school. So um so I think that uh, is kind of this like archetypal story that a lot of people experience and continue to experience now. But certainly a lot has changed over the past couple of years, and I think over the span of your career, I'm sure there's been a lot of other changes as well. So I think we'll spend a bit of time on this question. So from those early days to now, what is different that you observed now than when you started in the field?
So my first year as an RA was the year 2000, when we thought the world was going to end, right? It was Y2K. And also that next year was 9/11. And so I think I got into the field as a student staff member at a time where crisis was right there in front of us. Everything seemed uncertain. There was this urgency that felt really, really heavy for myself as a 20-year-old college student. I think there wasn't a ton of resources, and you did everything as an RA, right? You would you're cleaning up bodily fluids to you're putting the Voban down on the stuff. Um, and I think what has changed in that regard is there's so many more resources now. There's an office for every single thing that can happen. And so over the years, I've told myself, okay, do I need to do this thing? And how am I partnering differently and better with the various resources that are available to students now? I think along with that, there's been so many more resources because there's so many more things coming to light. I could attest that to social media and things being more visible and more in our face. But I think also there's been this onset of additional mental illnesses and recognition of that and being more open about what folks are going through. And so the more we hear and learn about where folks are in their journey and their narrative, another resource pops up. So that has been a definite difference. I think things that have stayed the same have been overworking. I think folks are still looking for this badge of honor of like, I work 80 hours a week, or I'm going to work all these hours and stay up till 3 a.m. because I just have to be the best, or I have to do 5 to 10 different things. And so my hope is that there'll be more this idea of, can I do a few things and do them very well? Or question or asking who am I trying to prove this to, right? How can I stay relevant and current without doing so many things and slowing down a little bit. I think the other thing that comes up Parents are more involved in a different way. I think they want to, it's a protection thing. I'm a parent myself, I have three kiddos. And I know I am more involved and I try to back up a little bit, but I think there's this piece of fear. The world feels so messy and scary, and parents just want to make sure that they've made the right decision, or families have made the right decision for their loved ones. And so it's, how are you going to protect my student? Do you care about them? Are they valued? I think that goes hand in hand with that question of the value of higher education, right? I'm sending my person to your campus. I expect this menu of things. How are you going to deliver that? And I think we, higher education, are still trying to articulate what that value is, when there's so many, competition with all these other fields out there. So the crisis, the resources, um, familiar involvement, and then just general wellness, and just checking in on where we are individually, but also as a community of educators, I think.
And so, yeah, this is it is a big question. I appreciate you kind of giving the outline of things there because, yeah, I want to dig in with a few of them in particular because, um, yeah, like that value proposition thing. I think that's a very astute kind of observation of like the familial involvement, how it's sort of manifesting now is likely rooted in that sort of equation that everybody's sort of tussling with of like, okay, there's a very high cost. Like, what am I getting out of it? And it is tough in terms of sort of addressing that, where I think writ large institutions can try to kind of tell that story and control the messaging a bit, but then there is also kind of the very personal emotional piece of like, especially if you're first gen, or just depending on like, where you choose to go and what you're studying and all that, like that's it's a very personal emotional decision for each individual. So I think you have to try to certainly, res life is one of those sort of arenas and avenues, is like, you know help students kind of build that relationship, that affinity with the institution, with their peers, or with mentors at the institution, those sort of things. But then I think I think that's just kind of like one point. But something I wanted to kind of talk about is that the first point you made of sort of the crisis response, where just in terms of sort of just the passage of time, is that like, yeah, like people who are in leadership positions now at campuses across the country are likely people who were college students, the onset of, yeah, Y2K, which obviously like wasn't a thing, but it was certainly like a specter sort of lurking for a while, and just people dealing with that anxiety. And then the actual reality of dealing with a tragic global event, and then just sort of years of kind of just, a perpetual kind of state of fear that a lot of people were dealing with. But then it's like, very unfortunate obviously that those things happen, but it's like, it is just wild realizing that sort of connective tissues still that remains of like people who went through those things are now in leadership positions who, well, you know what, maybe are pretty well equipped to navigate some of the things that are going on now. So I'm curious, like on that one first point, sort of your take on how you've maybe observed like your peers, your colleagues, sort of navigating sort of the tumultuous past 2 years, where it was sort of just another onset of this sort of unexpected crisis.
I, I think about, what is the risk involved? What is the impact? What is the ripple? And so I have to start there, because otherwise we move really, really fast and we create messiness. And so I find that if we're able to establish what is the timeline, like what needs to be taken care of right now in this moment, is someone in danger? How much time do we have to make a decision? You're often more thoughtful and you bring the right people along on the journey. I think, I was in a directorship when COVID started. And, I remember sitting in a meeting with tons of humans in the space, right, that would all need to connect in some way. And we were trying to prepare for isolation housing. What are we going to do when we get our first case? I kid you not, 30 minutes into that meeting, we get the phone call, we got a positive person. And so the tabletop, the exercise was over, right? Like, we have, this is real. And so I think we need, as I look around at my colleagues, it's the, how can you do the quick risk assessment? How can you figure out who needs to be in the space? How do you try all the things? And then also, when do you tap out? we get tired. We don't make our best decisions when we're tired. We rush. I remember getting called or text or Slack, like all these different ways of communicating, and I thought, am I really needed? So I think there's a boundaries piece as well when we're in crisis. So I think my assessment is, I heard someone say we can rush, but we don't have to hurry. And so, how do we slow down just enough and figure out what needs to be done without burning out good people, making messy mistakes, and playing, following things around with a mop? I don't like to play cleanup. Um, I think going through 9/11 and all that uncertainty, as a student staff member at the time, and all that uncertainty, you just had to wait until you had enough information to decide what to do next. And so, one of the moments that we're waiting when it comes to a crisis, um, who needs to be cared for in that moment? And then, what is the messaging and who gets that messaging? Are there things we need to share with families, things we need to share with our particular students? One of my top strengths is deliberative. So, I'm always going through worst case scenario. Um, and, sometimes my colleagues don't enjoy that at different spaces because I'm like, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they just want to go, go, go. But I do value folks who are like, let's just slow down as much as we're able and figure out what matters most.
No, no, I definitely agree because I think you did see, you know, local, city, state level, like stuff like that happening where they like make a decision, but then they're like, oh wait, hold on, wait, we got to like pivot and then like change it again or this or that, and it's like if you just waited, like recognize that like there's that temptation to just kind of rush out the door, but we could have waited a little bit more time to get more information before putting out information that we just then had to retract and all that. um yeah, it just made me think too. I remember when I was an RA and then my first year as a grad hall director, there was like bad hurricanes, in the mid Atlantic. I think it was like Irene and then Katrina when I was in New Jersey. And, neither of them were bad, but it was, I think, of definitely a hallmark example of the like kind of wait and see, like kind of just like let's sit back and then we'll sort of uh adapt versus like presuming, one thing or another. Cause I know one instance was like, the power went out and it's like, oh my God, are we gonna have to like move all the residents to another building that has a generator? And it's like, it's a like ridiculously strong storm out there. Like that could do more harm than do. Somebody gets hit by debris or something. It's like, we're all okay here for right now. So let's wait a little bit longer. Maybe the power comes back. Or like, we could just like sleep it out, like we could kind of manage or whatever. And that ended up being the case where like people just went to bed, we managed and woke up, power's back. And so it's just like, okay, well, uh, you're never going to know for certain, how things are going to shake out. But I think it's, taking the lessons from the instances where certain times you're going to call for quick, decisive action, and other times it's really going to be beneficial to recognize when you have that time and take that sort of, privilege and opportunity and everything. So I think trying to segue to some of the other points you made too, like, that sort of like martyrdom, like people like devoting so much of themselves to this work, which, is certainly a hallmark of education, for better or worse. But, in an instance like that, like of crisis response, like taking that time and sort of like recalibrating and being like, okay, I think there's going to be somebody else, like another resource, because, thankfully nowadays there are an abundance of specialized resources going to be like, I think somebody else is going to be able to better serve, your needs versus me trying to like, kind of get through it all with you. It's kind of that delegation. It's collaborating with other folks and recognizing that it doesn't all have to fall with on one person's shoulders. So yeah, but I think that's unfortunately something that's been very persistent is that sort of um you know uh imbalance that folks who work in residence life experience. And I think there's at least been so much like awareness building, and I think thankfully like the uh prevalence of like mental health support resources and stuff like that is part of the key, I think, of like breaking down like, why are you doing this, like what, who is this for? And it's like, oh okay, I've got a lot of stuff inside that is sort of manifesting here, so let's like process this and the proper environments of therapy and all those sort of things. So I'm curious, just maybe any before we move on to some of my other questions, sort of the final thoughts on sort of that martyrdom piece, sort of the emotional, wellness and balance and stuff that you've observed. If maybe you've seen hopefully you have hopefully seen maybe a positive change in the sense of a lot of awareness building around this and a lot more prevalence of like uh you know better help, but like therapies, resources and stuff for folks.
I think folks are becoming more comfortable with sharing their boundaries, right? This is where I need to tap out. And just when you're in community with each other, you can do that for each other and say, "Hey, I think it's time. Let me help you out." And so that connection piece is important. I think the other piece that's fascinating is this idea of, like you said, I have to fix or do everything. No one else can help me. So that's a trust piece. And so again, how are you building community with each other to have trust and know that this other office or resource, they're the expert, and naming that. I shared an example with one of my team members the other day. I said, I have these chairs in my office, and there were so many folks involved in the production of this chair, and they didn't know where it was going to end up. But there is trust that each person will do their part to make sure that this chair is going to end up at some place. And so, whether my part was mining the ore, making the fabric, putting the label on that chair, or delivering it to this physical office, I have to trust that each step was taken. And I think that's the thing that I've seen some folks adopt a little bit more, which is nice. Like, where's my place in this process? And then the other piece too, I think, is a balance between how do you not become numb. I can be a little more chill because I've seen some stuff, right? Like when you've been in residence life for a long time, but also, there's not always time to have a training or protocol. So this piece of being comfortable with making the best decision that you know how to, that is something I've seen other folks adopt, is the trust, being in community, caring for each other. And again, I just have to make a decision, and I have to trust you're going to back me up. Um, I think I don't want to say generationally because I struggle with that, but I think there's that other piece of the comfort I have being a little bit more seasoned versus I have some team members from various campuses who have wanted a manual and a step by step thing for every single thing. I had an old director that said you can't plan for the circus train to break down in the middle of town. Like there's no direction for all that. So I think it's the comfort when things are going to happen. We manage small towns, and you just got to make the best decision with what you have. And I feel like that's spreading a little bit, particularly with how we move through COVID.
Hmm. Yeah, the comfort with ambiguity, I think, is sort of a lesson learned. But I think I'm sure many of your sort of perspectives and thoughts on all this may be sort of informed by, obviously like opportunities like that, just sort of talking shop, professional development, and utilizing sort of resources to stay relevant. So I think, over the span of your career, maybe if that's also something that has changed or evolved, but how do you work to stay relevant? Because, yeah, I mean, I think just dating it back to being like, from the early 2000s to now, yeah, there's just any number of sort of things like social media and all that that have really kind of reshaped society and everything. So, yeah. So how do you work to stay relevant?
Having two teenagers help. I have two teenagers at home. But in the professional sense, something I always do every year, I sit down and do a one-on-one with all my new team members and all my entry level staff because I want to know where they're coming from, what is their experience, what did we tell you before you got here, and how are we measuring up? Because that's how I keep my finger on what's happening. I always say, our college students stay the same age, we get older. And so, how are we making sure that, like I like to read articles, I like to read journals, I try to stay active in more national organizations as well, meeting with my entry level folks. I say my door is open, right? And so we have coordinators, and they come in and they sit down and they talk. We go for coffee. It's that connection piece. I think with the blogging that I've been doing, it's really getting a sense for what's out there. What are people saying? How are they feeling? And so I try to write from a place of heart, but also hard issues of, do I matter? Am I valued? Um, I think also, a different campus I was at, we would do exit interviews. What was coming up in that space? What were they sharing? And then what were the trends across that? And then how do you make sure that you're taking that information and saying, we heard you and we want to do different and better? I also try to co chair committees when I can. and have folks on those committees that are entry level humans, right, or graduate students, and really staying close. And then, as I shared earlier, there are places where I just may not get it, right? And so it's, who do you have on your team who can speak to the current experiences and can help show you along the way? I was keynoting at a conference a couple of days ago, and I was Googling, I was trying to crowdsource, like, what do student leaders want to hear right now? Because my experience was very different. And so is this merger of, what was my experience? Now tell me about yours. And then where are the gaps and how can I help and support you? Because this is your journey right now. My time has passed. So it's the not pretending like I know what they're going through, and asking some really targeted questions and being open to what they might be experiencing, because I think things are different. I had some staff tell me once that I was using emojis wrong, and I was like, I have reached that age where I am not, I don't know what I'm doing and I need some help.
Well, because even yeah, like stuff like that, like, well, it meant this when I like learned about it, and it's just changed or whatever. But what I'm kind of hearing is, yeah, like having, a sense of humility, being open to hearing people and their experiences and adapting your point of views, or just like taking that as a cue of like, oh, that's something I need to learn more about, or just generally, yeah, as your kind of team culture of like, we need to do more of this, less of that, and just any of those things really informing the content that you seek out. And then I absolutely agree too of like, writing has always been a very helpful experience in you know kind of tying together all the disparate thoughts of just like the random things that I'll read and see this or that or whatever. And it's just like, okay, I need to really like articulate this, so let me just kind of synthesize everything together, and that can help sort of really kind of crystallize the learning moving forward, so that it then is uh, sort of in my knowledge base, to uh, pull from to make decisions and everything. But um yeah, I mean, I think it's all great stuff, and I think just littered throughout our conversation here is just like cues and sort of tangible things that I hope folks can kind of take away, where like it is a simple but very valuable practice to do something like an exit interview. Like, I think it says a lot about any organization to say like, we are going to take the time to almost just let you vent, like kind of just let you pour it all out. And it's like, you're free to, because like you're going to be gone in a week or something, like, but it's like, it helps us where like, whether it is like, okay, these are all reasons why you left, or just where it's like, okay, you have a unique perspective. You're looking through the rearview mirror versus like, it can sometimes be tough to see uh, kind of beyond or outside like what is while you're in it. But yeah, again, that humility, that willingness to take that feedback and uh, hopefully, you know, do something with it is definitely a powerful thing. 'Cause I think that is also a crucial ingredient. Is not just sort of listen and just like, yeah, sure, cool, whatever, and just like crumple it up and throw it in the in the trash kind of thing. It's like you do need to earnestly take it to heart and do something about it. Um, so I think on that general sort of vibe of like getting that feedback, getting advice, or uh those sort of things, kind of sharing wisdom and all that, is there any piece of advice that has stuck with you, that's always kind of rung in your head from a mentor, or just advice that this could be an and or both, either, whatever, just advice that you would give to others from your experience?
I had a supervisor tell me, so I had started a new job as an assistant director, and it was my second day, and they said, what do you think of the training so far? And I said, well, I just got here. I'm new. I don't want to say anything. I'm going to observe. And she said, I didn't hire you not to speak. And it was so powerful to have that affirmation or that invitation early on to provide feedback, and, especially as a leader or a mid level manager, right? To share from day one, here's what I'm noticing. And then how do I want to contribute to making things different and better? How do I, show that I can be an advocate for my team and for the department? Because that's ultimately what you're demonstrating, right? The ability to translate up and down, and then also be an advocate and tell the departmental story. So that piece of having the mic, and utilizing it, I have found, um, with the identities that I hold, that, at times I have been, or folks have been hired because they fit this identity marker, right? We need more marginalized folks. And so you're hiring folks for how they look, but are you also hiring them for their lived experience? And if you're bringing folks to campus because of what they look like and not for how they've lived or who they are, that's a big disconnect. And so my piece would be twofold: that speak up and create spaces where folks can speak up and be their authentic selves. But also, when you're recruiting folks, right, make sure you are hiring the entire person and know that they come with experiences, they come with life stories, and they're going to need allyship and advocacy, because it's important to say, you have a space here, you matter, and we're going to support you and back you up. And here are your resources. Those might be my two nuggets.
No, I mean they're good ones because yeah, I mean it's the idea where like so many things in life people are earnestly striving towards, I think, kind of the right result, but they end up just kind of like checking the box and then just kind of like, "Whew, okay, like it's done, whatever." But I think how you're kind of capturing it is like kind of the maximizing the full potential and sort of context of like, okay, you're bringing together a diverse team. Great. What are you doing with that? Like, how are you, like you said, creating that space and taking that, because I've certainly had these experiences as well. So like just to bold and underline, like where a leader kind of like almost like points to be like, hey, we chose you for a reason. Like we want you here. You're incredible. Like speak up, like those sort of things. So like even just knowing that little tap on the shoulder and how powerful that can be to make sure that, again, not everybody is so uh, capable or willing to, share their point of view and everything, and really affirming the value of what they're bringing in. And ideally, that you do have a team that are bringing, yeah, diverse experiences and perspectives and all those sort of things. So, uh, yeah, it's kind of the two sides of the coin. Like for the individual, you know, kind of find that confidence, however you can, but then recognize, if you are somebody who manages people, that you kind of have a important opportunity to kind of be a catalyst to help kind of get that going, and then hopefully it sort of um, goes on from there. But um, yeah, I think just when you're building a team, I've been again in that sort of instance where it's like feeling like kind of the odd person out, but I think like there has to have been sort of like a voice in the back of their head where it's like, well, no, I want somebody who's kind of coming in and is not just sort of the, winning others over, the cheerleader, the sort of extroverted, sort of just, huge ball of energy. It's like if somebody can be, more thoughtful and more kind of like administrative and all those sort of things, they can help create the structure where those folks can, shine even brighter. So yeah, how are you facilitating that person to be able to do their best work, and for every member of your team to be able to do their best work? So, uh, yeah, incredible advice. I think we'll be leaving it there, but thank you so much for everything that you shared and all your perspectives and experiences, and obviously for the great work you're bringing to the blog team here. And yeah, we'll have ways to connect with you as well in the show notes for this episode. But um, yeah, it was a great conversation, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much.